Welcome to Brightly Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. This season, we're embarking on a journey of personal growth and reflection as we explore the depths of the human experience. We'll use our good and bad experiences, friendship, and passions to inspire thought provoking conversation and soul driven advice to better help you create a life worth living and step more brightly into yourself, inch by inch.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tracy.
I'm so excited. Today's episode is something we have talked about for over a year.
It has been. It has.
So it's not as climactic as I wanted it to be, but we're just starting. We're just doing it. Book club.
Book club.
And
That's right.
it's going to be a little unconventional. So usually in a book club, you're in a room with other people and you're all talking about the book. We're going to start with just talking on the show about what we're reading. And then as we see people engaging with it, and if you're able to or inspired to pick up these books, or if you want to continue the conversation with us, maybe we'll do some Zooms or in some virtual book clubs, or if you're local in Minnesota, maybe something in person someday.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so do you want to tell about the book we're talking about today?
Yeah. So it is, and we both have a copy and
From the library.
From the library. Although I just told Tracy today, I think I have to buy it. It's Minimalista by Shira Gill. And well, first of all, I love the title Minimalista. Please. I love it. Now, I wasn't looking, like, I was not in the market for any kind of organizational book, although I love watching organizational shows. Like,
Ooh.
I loved watching she had a short series on Netflix. She did the
Joy. Does it spark joy?
Yes, it was wonderful. And then there's the Home Edit. They have a Netflix show as well. I just love watching these shows. But
I've never seen these shows. I read Marie Kondo's book
and I never read her book.
Oh, it's super tiny. It's a real thin, real straight to the point. And don't worry about reading it because she has since come out, had children, and be like, I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm so sorry, everybody. She's changed her whole philosophy, it seems like.
Hilarious. Yeah.
But so I've never really been in this space. I'm a Virgo. I'm kind of both my strength and my weakness in life is my dedication to organization.
Yeah.
But the Container Store is one of my favorite stores, and a lot of the creators you mentioned have products there. And so when I later learned that that's why they have products there, is they have these shows, they have these processes, they have these books. I was really intrigued on, well, what could I learn?
Right. And I mean, I don't know if have you started the book?
A year ago. 2023 Tracy did give it a valiant effort. She didn't read it cover to cover. Okay. And then as we discussed a couple weeks ago, I did get it again from the library, so I have been paging through it. But you did actually, you read it and
I read it and like did notes and all kinds of things. But I will say the reason why I got the book, like I said, I wasn't actually looking for anything, but I listened to podcasts, and 2 separate podcasts that I listened to were interviewing Shira Gill. And this was a year ago, 2 years ago. She had a different book coming out, and now she has another book coming out. So I just heard her on another podcast being interviewed again. I'm like, divine timing. But I just loved her point of view. I loved how she was talking about things. I loved how she's very much like, my minimalistic point of view might not be yours. Like, I love the way she's just like, I'm not here to take away your joy. Like, maybe you love hats. Maybe 10 hats are great for you. Maybe 15, probably not 100. Like, that's how she is. So I thought, let me just get this book. And one of the things I loved is she asks you questions, not just like, does it spark joy, but like, in this room or in this drawer or in this area, what do you want to be able to do here? Like, what are the feelings you want to have? I just love the questions she asked, but I do want to read this. What minimalism is and isn't. So it just says, before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that suffering caused by the accumulation of clutter is a condition of privilege, as it requires both a home and a budget to accumulate those possessions. And so I love it that she just like came right out, and said that. But the other thing that I did really love is that there is a process. And in the process, like you're clarifying what you want the room to. I could just go on and on about this. And you can ask me questions. Ask me questions.
And so when we were talking about, so if you didn't listen to our last episode, we took quite an extended hiatus this year. And when we were kind of talking about, okay, well, if we come back, because we do have a different vision for season 5, and we understand season 4 has been all over the place as we have been, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why I didn't want to let this go, because you did the work and you did love it. But when we were going to do it last year, it was going to be our first show of 2024 because you started it around this time in October in 2023, and you were using it to help shape your New Year's resolutions, your 2025 goals, bring in new energy, let stuff go. And it was part of how, like we do the yearly compass and the yearly review, right? You took it as a way to like really review your belongings and how you let things in and to inspire your 2024. And like I said, you were doing the work.
I was.
So that's why we wanted to bring that back to the podcast. But what inspired you when I said, hey, let's do a book club? This is so unlike any of the other books either of us have agreed on or even put forth. Like, why this book? Why for Brightly?
The funny thing is that this book is a self-development book. Yes, it packages itself as an organizational, let's get your surroundings in order, but it literally is self-development, and you smack up against like beliefs about yourself. You smack up against things where you're like, oh, I did not know that about myself. Like it is self-development. And I also, I'm trying to think like, sorry. It brings up such interesting points of view, and it makes you go through a process that it's pretty amazing. And so I felt like transformationally, we love transformation here at Brightly, and it helps you do that. And it helps you do it tangibly and intangibly. And the reason I said I need to buy it is because I need to do it again. So it's a continual process because I still haven't quite, like I never got to the point in my closet that I wanted to get to. And I did do some fabulous things with like my writing stuff, with Brightly stuff. Like I've got things organized now. I have like a creativity basket. Like it's just amazing. But then if you're watching on YouTube and you can see behind me, I now have my father-in-law's drafting table. Like why did I feel like I needed to take that? Because now I know myself. But that's why I felt like it would be a good book for Brightly, because I think it is a transformational book.
And we focus so much on being your brightest self and transforming that you are going to need to reassess the processes in your life and how you make decisions or where you live, right? Like if you are transforming, you are changing, your space is a part of that, right? Like if you completely transformed into the person you dreamed you could be, you wish you could be, you were that main character, whatnot. Does your space reflect where that person would be the brightest version of themselves, the most successful version, doing what they want to do? Does your space support you transforming? Or is it, bringing up bad habits, bad memories, bad moods? How is it making you feel. And so I think it's important to revisit these things. And also, I loved how you said, like, when you were doing it last year, what came up was like brightly, work, my writing, the book, my office, right? Like, this isn't necessarily something where you have to think of your entire house and, like all 40 years of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You can just be like, the energy in my office feels stagnant. I'm gonna start here, right?
You
And
can start with a drawer.
see,
I love that, where it's just like, I, and that is, I think, how I started, was one drawer. I was like, what is the purpose of this drawer? This is the purpose it needs to have. And now I can take everything out of it that doesn't serve that purpose and put the things back that do serve that purpose. So you
so
can start on with small things.
okay, now that we've kind of like teased everybody and sold the book, pause here, go get it. Or keep listening and then let us know in our socials how you felt about it. But when we do book club, we're gonna kind of go through like three broad questions for every book, and it could be wildly different. But so I'm gonna, since this was your pick, I'm gonna kind
Yeah.
of Q&A with you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for you, when you went through it, what questions were answered for you?
Well, honestly, first of all, I wondered, like, my house is very organized and clean. Like, it's very neat and
It's
clean,
tidy. Yeah.
and it seems organized. And I thought, how can this book help me if I'm already awesome? Right. I'm like, yes, I loved how she talked, but how can this book actually help me if I
Mhm.
think, my house is perfect? Well, spoiler alert. I am not perfect. Okay, so it answered
Okay,
that
I
question.
love I love your on-air edit of "I'm not perfect," which as your friend, I'd make a disagreement with, but I could also, we're not striving for perfection, we're striving for our brightest self,
Yeah.
right? In the notes, you said, "How can she help me if I'm already awesome?" And then "I'm not awesome," ellipses. And I was like, "No, you're still pretty effing awesome." Like, so I'm glad it went from "I'm not
Thank
awesome"
you.
to "I'm not perfect." And I love that at the very least, like, maybe you are a great organizer, but this book just reminded you, like, even if you're great, like, there's still room to change, still room to grow. You could still do
Yes.
it differently, and
Yes.
have it have an impact on you and not just be doing it different for the sake of doing it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly was like, how could, like, fewer things actually change my life? And it did. It did change. It changed many things. I'm gonna just jump off topic for a second.
Sure.
Rick saw me doing these things, and then he started doing it as well, in like the garage and different aspects in his his closet. He got through his closet. I still haven't gotten through my closet, but
So when it
yeah.
came also to like the stuff you were, to have fewer things, you have to get rid of things. Did you donate? Did you gift? Did you sell? Like, I have to imagine that the release of items actually presents an opportunity for someone else in the world who needed that item in that moment and needed it more.
And honestly, Tracy, that actually helped me in the process, because I do have a very hard time, especially if someone has given me a gift. And if now I don't have a use for it anymore, it's very hard for me to part with that, because there's like this whole story structure around this item. But that every time I thought about someone else is going to love this, that helped me. And so I donated. I don't sell. That just feels like that would have been
Another
I would have
task.
had a whole nother task. So donating that's what I did, was donate. Oh, I take that back. I did have a whole box of clothes that I brought to my daughter and granddaughter and said, take what you will. And they were like, yes, everything. So yeah.
So separate from this process, because I am pretty good at every year I go through stuff and
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at being like I make the hard cuts. I'm pretty decisive. I make those decisions. But if there's anything that I'm unsure of or I want to hold on to, I say, fine, you can. But if in this time next year when you do it, you haven't used it to its full potential, it's out, right? Like, prove to
Mhm.
yourself you want this. It goes to the front of the closet. It gets a space on a shelf, right? Like, you don't hide it, you don't whatnot. And if you're still not using it, then it's gone, right? Like, so maybe I held on to it for 6 months to a year more, but what I did this most recent year when I did it, is I've started holding, at first I called it a virtual garage sale during the pandemic where I would just send photos and videos just to my family or just people when I had Facebook on Facebook and be like,
Mhm.
first come, first serve, who wants it, right? And, like, just make it really easy, have it find its new home, but more recently, I held a boutique for my sister who had just given birth, and so now, she's always smaller than me, but now her pregnancy size, like, my clothes aren't gonna be massive on her, and they're gonna be a good transition, and there were a lot of dresses and things I wanted to hold on to because in this post-pandemic life, I just didn't wear them as much as I wanted, or they do look good on me, or I do like them, but when looking through my life and being like, it's making it harder to have a closet to hold on to clothes I'm not wearing, because maybe I'll wear them someday. So I held a boutique. I invited her over, kept her kids occupied, and she got to try stuff on. There were hats, there were jewelry, there were clothes. She left with bags and bags of stuff, and already, Amy, she's worn them on social media more than I ever have to begin with.
Isn't that
More than I
lovely?
ever have, and
Yeah.
she seems really happy with it too, and, like, she
Yeah.
gets all this new, barely worn stuff. My closet stops giving me anxiety because it's tiny, it's a small old house, and so that's where, like, I loved, like, how the question this book kinda answered for me is, like, how do I stop getting to that point? How do I stop buying a dress for an event, right, and instead start buying a dress for my life, right? Like, do I have more than one occasion I would wear this? Would I only wear it for special like, would I
Mhm.
treasure it, or would I allow myself to use my belongings?
Mhm. That's
And
a
so for
really good good question.
yeah, because even, like, for me, because that was my question, like, I was kinda like I've read, the Joy book. I'm pretty good at making cuts. I can get rid of stuff. Like, I used to keep certain closets in when I bought this house empty so that, like, it would feng shui, my way into, like, allowing growth into my life and maybe a partner or kids or something like that. And then as things do over 6 years, those processes and policies, you're not as
Yeah.
stringent on it and
Yeah.
spaces fill and you don't get rid of stuff or you hold on to stuff, but even with how organized and, like, I'm like, I could have written a book on organization, right? And I am pretty minimalistic. I also have ADHD doom piles all over my house and my home, baskets, and, like, I look at my
Wait,
perfectly
wait, wait. ADHD doom piles?
yeah, we've never
Explain.
talked about this?
No.
Okay, so I have ADD, or that's what my one of the doctors in my life always corrects me when I say ADHD because the diagnosis has changed. It used to be ADD or ADHD, and I'm like, the hyperactivity is in here. It is in my mind, it is in my brain, it is inside.
Mhm. Yeah.
But so typically what you do is you have your hyper focuses, which I also feel like is just seasonal hobbies and interests, and that you hyper focus on a thing and you work and work and work on it and you gather all your materials and your stuff or whatever,
Mhm.
and then you either lose interest, discover a new interest, or you just can't attend to it. And so stuff just kind of gets set in these little piles you're totally going to return to. My saving grace in life was buying like nice wicker baskets so that they could still be in my living room and everybody thinks I'm a tidy Tracy, but I know I have these little chaos boxes just decorating my
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, I look at this perfectly organized file folder systems, labels, all this stuff, and yet all I did today, Amy, I took the day off of work, so, technically it was yesterday, I guess, but I had all this stuff I've been working on and preparing and getting ready for my leave and the podcast and my day job, and I just picked everything up and just threw it in a massive pile on the table next to me, and, like, I just looked at it before we started the show, and I was like, "I'm not touching that this week," right? Like, that's potentially gonna stay there for months because I'm like, "Yeah, I know where everything is. I know what's in that massive doom pile." And it's like, it's hiding my organization, right? I'm gonna be
Yeah.
less likely to utilize the things that I've taken the time
Right.
to
Right.
organize in my other interests because I got this little pile of doom right here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like, this was the question I answered for me, like you, is like, you can always learn to do things better. There are other things you could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for you, did it take you a long time to like you started doing it right away as you read it
I
last
did
year, right?
start doing it right away. And then, things happen and then maybe took a break and then would do it with something else. And recently realized, oh, girl, you need to do it again. And I think you know, that's actually one of the things that it's not a one and done.
Would you
Some things are like, this is where the fingernail clippers go.
Yeah.
Done. Right. But what were you going to ask?
I was going to ask you what did you learn, but then the question that popped into my head is, would you have considered this shadow work?
Uh, abs- Absolutely, it's shadow work because first of all, one thing I did learn is I'm a little secret hoarder, and I have to, and by secret hoarder, what I mean is I have drawers and little cubbies and things closed in. So your doom piles, apparently I have those things too. But I do things like, oh, I must save every glass container, no matter if it was moisturizer or pickles that was in it, must save every glass container because I might need that in the future. And
Amy,
what?
I was supposed to have surgery yesterday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
On Wednesday or Tuesday was trash day. They hadn't come as of 1 p.m. and my last meeting of the day was done. I went into my closet. I picked out my 2 storage containers full of those things that came here to this house when I bought it 6+ years ago. Just dumped them in a trash bag and just ran them out. I was like, no second guessing. You can't, you can't undo it. Because I had to, when I was flipping through this book to prepare, I
Yeah.
was reminded that that was one of my tasks to look through and like decide if I really needed this eyedropper glass bottle from God knows
Yes.
when. And I was like, you haven't used it in 6 years. You don't need it.
It's very hard. And I have to keep relearning that I don't need it. And I have ball jars with the caps. That's what I
Same.
use for food, right? I don't need the pickle jar. I
And
don't need it.
if this changes, like I'm not going to start mass producing anything that would need the amount
Right.
of jars I
Right.
was keeping anyways. And I
Right.
continue to eat pickles to this day. I continue to use the products that these original ones came from.
Right.
Um, and so yeah, that was a huge learning thing for me too, is you need to be okay with waste. You bought it in the first place, right? What could be recycled, I did take the time to
But
recycle the
right.
larger
Right.
items, but
No,
yeah.
I figured that out. But the shadow work is just that whole thing of like, looking at myself, well, first of all, realizing that so much of my sort of secret hoarding or not getting rid of things is from this lack perspective. And then having to say, why are you having this lack mentality in your life when you have proof of abundance in your life and you're fine and you have a full-time job and your husband is working and you have a house? Like, why do I think I need to save every scrap of paper, every little, oh, here, I'm getting rid of this t-shirt, it's in bad shape, I can't donate it, let me cut it up for something, I don't know. So I have to keep looking at that. It has not gone away yet, but I'm aware of it. And so I can keep asking myself the questions. But yeah, yeah, shadow workbook. No, just get Minimalista.
And then the reason why I thought shadow work is it's layered and you have to keep getting back to it to level up. And to
And
move
you
forward and
have
move
to,
on.
yes, and it's never ending. You have to continue to do it. You just
Yeah.
do.
And for me, so I had to recognize that although I came into this house fairly minimalistic. Like you said, like books, I'm never gonna be like I am more minimalistic than I was in the past. I'm pretty good at throwing the stuff I don't want to keep. Once it's read,
Mhm.
it'll go in the little free library if it's not something I feel like.
I have a pile right now in
Right.
my car to be dropped off at
Yep,
the little
I
free
donate. I will
libraries.
move those out, but that's the
Yeah.
one thing where you'd look at my house and be like, Tracy, there's no way you're a minimalist. Look at all the books, right? So again, we're grouping things in categories, but I was good at not hoarding. I was good at not keeping things for fear that they might mean something one day. Or, my grandma passed earlier this year, and I had learned from death 20 years ago, just because it was
Mhm.
special to the person doesn't mean I have to keep it till I die. Like
Yeah.
we can stop this chain
Yeah.
and keep what's important to me. But what I had to recognize is that in buying this house, suddenly everything seemed like it could have a purpose someday. I'm not that kind of crafty. Why am I hoarding onto this and I've
Yeah.
never used most of it. It's never come up. And not once in my life have I ever purchased an empty glass eye bottle dropper for something. I've never had that lack. So why do I suddenly feel compelled? Maybe it's something with age. It just happens, but I was suddenly with the pandemic and inflation and potential for recession, I was
Yeah.
starting to find value in things that don't actually have value in my life. Even if the worst thing ever happened, it would become costly to keep it or to try and get rid of it.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that was the part of the shadow work for me was like, oh, you took on new habits um
Yeah.
that you didn't think you had. And this really pointed it out to me.
She asks questions and you are supposed to answer them. And what I loved was, and I won't go through all the questions, but one question, what do you want to create space for? Like, are you kidding me? Like that just then it gets you to look at your surroundings, your life, because I took that question as not only do I want to create space, like I want to create space so I can do these things, but also like space in my life, right? Space not just in your surroundings, but in your life for certain things. And then she goes, through other things like what do you want more of? Meaning like, and I wrote grace and ease, creativity, time, magic, right? And then another great question was primary motivation to make the change now. And at the time, I was still faced with a lot of my mom's things,
Mm.
right? And so and I think why it's really coming up right now for me to do it again is that now we have a bunch of
Another
things
family member.
from from my husband's mom and dad who
Yeah,
they did not pass away. They moved from
they're downsizing.
their home of, I mean, that's where Rick was born. So
Wow.
they've been in that house for many years.
And that has to make it
Um,
even more challenging because the person these things meant something to is going to see where they go, right? And so,
exactly.
yeah.
And when I said yes to the drafting table, I thought it was old and wooden, and it turns out it's newer and white. And so then I was like, no, I don't need it. But Shorty, my father-in-law, was like, Amy wants that. No, Amy wants that. I'm like, well, I guess I'm getting a drafting table.
You're taking up
So
a new hobby. You didn't, and
no,
like
actually, you know what? It is going to be filled with post-it notes for
I
the
was just
new
gonna
book.
say it's works like don't you do the index cards for your writing and stuff
I
like
do
that?
index
Like
cards or post-it notes. So I can tape index cards to it. Yeah. So that's what it's going to be. Yes.
and I want to go back earlier. You called yourself a hoarder.
Yeah.
And that I would never describe you that way because your house is really tidy. I would say you're a collector. And so that has to make it harder to let go. Um, because you are somewhat intentional with what you keep. Even if in the moment you need to
Hmm.
recognize, do I really need to have this for the length of time it's now going to be in my home for if
I'm
I
just,
take this?
I'm just gonna grab something. And yes, I am a collector. And so in this so one of my children, if you're on YouTube, you can see, made this
little
cool thing.
container with a lid.
Yeah. And so I have some macaroni necklaces, broken pottery, rock, an angel thing, a shark's tooth. Like, what am I doing?
When my cat of 17 years passed earlier this year, I was in a bit of a panic because some photos I had of her as a kitten weren't digitally saved where I thought they were.
Oh.
And thankfully I did find them, but in the process of looking, I was like, she predates my digital camera. She absolutely predated even the existence of the iPhone, let alone me having one.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have photo boxes all throughout my house. They're not necessarily filled with photos, it's with mementos and like little collections like that cup you showed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did find the printouts that were in there, but I found all the stuff I kept that my nieces and nephews made for me or people gifted me. And although I remembered the item, I don't as clearly remember the person or the story associated with why it's important. I just know it was important. I do recognize it was important. So now I'm faced with this challenge of, and I'm probably going to use this book then during my leave to kind of do that. Do I let it go or do I try and remember harder? Like,
yeah,
because and I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and the oldest one just turned 17, and what I thought I would remember 17 years ago forever, I don't quite remember. And they don't remember. I didn't even remember I had it till I looked for these photos.
Yes, there are things that I have saved that the kids drew or made or whatever, and they look at me and go, "Mom, why do you still have that?" I'm like, "I can't get rid of that." They go, "Yes, you can." And then I'm just like, "What are you talking about?" But I look at something like this, holding up this little box again, and the odd little pieces in there. And to me, this is magic, right? And so it's very hard for me to get rid of this because this is like little, yes, it's like, oh, this is now magic.
Yeah, and when I started, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna have one photo box of mementos. But as I've gone through life and my homes have gotten bigger, I now have like 5 boxes of mementos, and I thought that they all fit in this one big box, but no, I have 5 different boxes on different floors of my home.
Yeah.
That I'm like, this is the stuff I need to edit again. Um, because yeah, and it's enough to know that history was there. I don't necessarily need this little stuffed animal they don't remember giving me.
Rick kept saying when, people were worrying about different things, like especially his mom. But he said, you don't need the thing, you have the memory. And I agree with that logically, but when I'm faced with it, it's very hard to part with something.
Yeah. And when I look at when my grandma was 91 when she passed, and I'm left with one box of her belongings yet, and it's photos. It's photos that are over 100 years old.
Yeah.
And like when I look at 91 years of life and everywhere she moved and even all the assisted living and nursing homes and things at the end, the one thing that she kept was just the pictures to remind her of those memories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That's enough. Okay, so now that since you're the one that kind of went through the whole book, what questions are you left with, if any?
At the time it was, can I maintain this, which another spoiler alert, no, you need to keep doing it.
It has to be intentional.
Yes, and it does have to be intentional. And a big one was what other beliefs about myself need challenging, because it did smack me in the face so many times that now I'm like, what else do I believe about myself that maybe isn't really true? And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with finding that out. Yeah.
So what's next?
For a book club, or
just now that you've read it, what's next? So it sounds like you're going to buy it.
I am going to buy it. I'm actually going to go through it again and redo the questions that she asks, because this was 2023 Amy who did this. and now it's 2024 Amy, and there might be some differences. And I I want to I want to dig deep into a couple different areas. I want to dig deep into this office again, like continually, but I want to dig deep into that and myself and just really confront this whole this lack mentality.
I have to imagine, I mean, as we've talked about, you're preparing for retirement, Amy, and I think it was you at the top of the show who was like, who do I want to make space to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
so that adds a whole nother layer to this as you go through the book. It's not just about current and past Amy, it's that future you don't know who you are yet, right? Like last year you didn't think you'd be doing this again in October, right?
I didn't. I didn't. But
Do you think
I'm very excited about it. What were you
Do you
going to
think the
say?
time of year will make a difference? I mean, you're kind of doing it at the same time you did last year, so maybe for you it is just kind of seasonal.
Yeah.
I tend to do it with the equinoxes without even noticing it. And that's when I did the boutique thing for my sister, and so
That's
spring
so
and fall for me.
interesting.
I re- I r- I have such an impulse to reorganize my entire home, both in the spring and in the fall. So like people who come here are like, "Oh, your living room's different." And I'm like, "Well, I only have two ways I can do it, and I know I have this impulse twice a year, so I don't fight it."
I think for me, it happens in the spring and the fall, but for different reasons. It
Mm.
happens when I'm taking out my summer clothes and putting away my
Yeah,
fall clothes, and then the opposite. So right now I'm taking out my fall and winter clothes.
those
So
natural
I'm
transitions.
naturally, I want to get rid of things. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, well, anything else you wanted to end with about Minimalista?
No, I'm excited to dig back into it. And I hope people, like I said, we got it from the library. You
Yeah,
don't try before you buy, people.
it's a
Get
great
it from the library.
and our library too, like that's still supporting the author, right? Like, and the
Yes.
more people who
Yes.
get it from the library, the more books that they order.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to preview our combined next pick. I think we both put this forward, but we're going
Yeah.
to be talking about Grimoire Girl by Hilary Burton Morgan. So some of you might know her from One Tree Hill. I know her as an MTV TRL VJ, and she is a great actress. She has a podcast. These are memoirs. She has another book called The Rural Diaries. You don't have to read them in order to understand, but
Mhm.
she's so inspiring, and the tagline for this book is creating an inheritance of magic and mischief.
I just love it.
And so, yeah, if you have some time, this will probably do it in, or you'll probably hear it in November. So you do have a little bit of time. If Minimalista wasn't quite your thing, memoirs are kind of an easy thing. We both listened to it. I got the audiobook again from the library.
10 out of
But
10 recommend listening to it.
absolutely.
She does such a great job.
And
Yeah.
an amazing pace too. Like you
Yes.
can tell she's an actor and a storyteller and a
Yes.
writer. She's great to follow on Instagram. But yeah, if you wanna get ahead or meet up with us, we'll try and post the date in advance too. But Grimoire Girl by Hilary Burton Morgan. Um,
Yeah. So, hey, if this episode spoke to you or your soul, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And I'll even look for polls either within Spotify or on Instagram, or even just email us. Do you want to do in real time book club with us? Not necessarily being recorded to air on the show, but would you want to join us via Zoom to talk about the books that we pick? I'd love to hear that. But until then, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day.